What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So, if you saw the thumbnail, you know that I am sort of making fun, but I think in this video you're going to find that I'm not. You hear that common default trope. Anytime anybody says, oh, I got a new guitar, oh, I want to get new pickups, I want to do some sort of modification, you know, because like we enjoy the hobby, because it's fun to just do stuff, somebody will invariably jump in the comments section or jump right into your brain in person and be like,
well, you know, bro, like, the tone is in the hands. Like, the gear doesn't matter if, you know, the tone is in the hands.
I hate that. But here's the thing. They're not wrong. They're not wrong. But what I want to talk about today is where that sort of crosses over. Obviously, we play guitar with our hands, so our hands do matter. How we interact with the guitar, how our hands interact with the guitar, how our body interacts with the guitar, has a lot to do with it. But there are some technical things that as we choose our instrument, as we choose our guitar, as we choose some various things, that will affect our overall tone based on how we interact with that guitar. Meaning, the tone's in your hands, but the gear choices you make affect how the tone is in your hands. Let me explain. Let's talk about the first, easiest, most obvious kind of thing that we think about. String gauge. Now, a lot of people would take string gauge and they'd say, well, this is how, it determines how easy the guitar plays, right? Like, I want to, I want to have it a little more flexible. I want to be able to bend more. I don't want it to hurt my fingers, etc. So in that respect, you kind of default to, oh, I play 10s, I play 9s, I play, whatever. But then you start to look at like really good guitar players, and what you might find is they don't actually default to one string gauge. A lot of them don't default to one string gauge across every guitar. It might have a lot to do with the scale length of the guitar, whether it's 25.5, 24/7/5, 25. It might have a lot to do with what type of music they play on the guitar, how they use the instrument, because as we're playing, that interaction between our hands and the strings is probably one of the most important. So it's not just about bending or ease of playing, but it could also have to do with pick attack. It could have to do with how hard we play, right? Think about Stevie Ray Vaughan, who played half step down with 13s, and he just attacked the guitar. Now, I've played the prototype of the Fender Custom Shop #1 Stevie Ray guitar that was set up just like he set it up, and I couldn't really play it and make it sound good, because I don't play like that. The way he played that instrument with those strings had a lot to do with how he sounded, how he interacted with the instrument. So don't just be like, I put 10s on everything, I put 9s on everything, but I would encourage you to not just look at the string gauge itself, but how you interact with it, what type of music you're playing, the type of scaling, all those things. Factor that in and experiment and see if you can get not just more tone, less tone, sustain, those stupid tropes that people say, but can you interact with the instrument differently in a way that gets you a different result? That's different than saying, well, 8s have less tone than 10s, because that's just not true. It's how you interact with the strings. So if you experiment with that, yeah, you might explore something new. It's kind of fun. Now, the next thing would be to talk about neck profile. Again, this is something where people will just default to one thing. I can only play skinny necks. I can't play fat necks. Well, it's not just about skinny and fat. There's all kinds of different shapes, right? We have U shape, we have C shape, we have D shape, we have the asymmetrical kind of stuff, we have modern, we have vintage. There's all kinds of different neck profiles. What's interesting about that is it really affects how you interact with the instrument. Again, this might not have anything to do with whether you can or can't play the guitar. Anybody who can play a guitar can actually play a guitar, no matter the neck profile. Are you natural on it? That's another thing. Does it do what you want it to do for the type of music that you play? That's also another thing, right? But this is another thing where I would encourage you to experiment. So this is like a modern C, but a little bit thicker on our Dylan Talks Tone exclusive Texas Toast Guitar Challenger here. And this is super comfortable, but it's not the same as like the Strat C that I just had. Now I can play both of them, but what I'll find out is, even though they're sort of similar and they kind of are related, I interact with the instrument a lot different, and it actually makes me want to play music differently. It makes me want to play different stuff on this guitar. And then we come over here to a Gibson Les Paul, and the profile is totally different, right? It's not just the thickness or the width of the neck, it's also the shape, how it rolls off the back here. So I'm a guy who wraps my thumb over a lot, so how I do that affects things. How far under you have to wrap your hand to play, like all those sorts of things are affected by neck profile. And again, this is one of those things where people will just say, I can't play fat necks, I can only play X or Y neck. I think we default into those things unnecessarily, and this is again where I would encourage you to experiment. Closely related to neck profile is fret size. Now, this is an interesting one. Many people think about neck profile and fret size in two different departments, but I want to talk to you real quick about how they are related. Most of the time we think of like vintage style frets on like a Gibson, right? Like an old Gibson, like I've got that Custom Shop Junior, and it's got real small frets on it. And so what will end up happening is you end up touching the fretboard a lot more. Bends are a little different. How you fret the guitar is a little different, so you kind of can feel you feel the fretboard differently, right? With big frets versus small frets. Let me know in the comments, and also on big frets, you can push hard and kind of pull things out of tune. Let me know in the comments what you found when you experiment with different fret sizes. So this is another thing where we can kind of default into I like small frets or I like big frets. But getting back to the neck profile thing, here's something I want you to think about that you might not have thought of. When we look at our fret size, this can actually play into our overall neck profile and size. Think about this. Fret a bar chord or fret any chord on the guitar, and look at the distance between the top of the string and the back of the neck where your thumb is. If those frets are bigger, right, so I'll give you this perspective, then your hand will be actually further away on a large fret or closer this way on a smaller fret if everything else is equal. So if you had the same neck profile, basically, you had basically the same fretboard radius, but you had bigger frets, then all of a sudden your neck, your hand's doing this. It's very minute, a couple thousandths of an inch, but it does change the way you interact with the guitar. This is all about our interactions with the instrument, right? The tone is in the hands. It's all about our interaction with the instrument. So think about that. Pretty interesting, right? It almost like changes your grip. Like the fret size can contribute to your grip diameter, if you will. Like I think about it like with dirt bikes, or like how fat your grips are or thin. Same kind of thing here. Neck profile / fret size can interact. Have you tried a smaller fret with bigger, or smaller neck profile with bigger frets? Have you tried or vice versa? Or have you ever had the same guitar and changed fret size? Did that affect how you played the guitar? Let me know in the comments. All right, let's talk about radius. So this guitar is very flat. I think this guitar, I want to say this guitar is 14. The Gibson that I just had was 12. The Strat that I think I had was a 9.5. I think the Gibson or the Texas Toast is a 12. So we might initially think of fretboard radius as it relates to how easy it is to bend, right? Like up here on the higher, especially in the higher register, on a 7 1/4, for example, you may fret out. Like it may give you some weird buzzes and stuff as you bend at the higher frets. That's not totally true. You can set up a 7 1/4 radius fretboard very well and be able to bend all over the place. It's no big deal. But that's kind of the common thing that people say is the flatter the fretboard, the easier it is to do bends, right? And the more radius the fretboard is, like a 7 1/4, the easier it is to do like your cowboy chords down here in your position 1. It's not just about that though. Again, this has a lot to do with how our hand sits on the fretboard, because that curve changes the shape of your hand, right? The other thing that can happen is when you have a relatively conventional neck profile, and then you radius it a lot with a 7 1/4, for example, or you radius it less with a 12, for example, as that fretboard gets flatter, the shoulders of the neck right here get fatter. So it not only changes how much you can bend, but it changes the shape of the back of the neck. This right here on the end with a flatter fretboard radius can feel different than less of a fretboard radius like a 7 1/4, all other things being equal. So it can change the way the guitar feels. It's a really interesting thing. It's not just about how much you can bend. What is your favorite fretboard radius? Have you experimented with fretboard radiuses, and what was the result of that experimentation? And then, of course, the last pretty obvious thing I can think of kind of in this conversation, I was thinking of 5 things today, is plectrum, your guitar pick. What is your favorite size, shape, thickness of guitar pick? Have you experimented with this? This is an interesting evolution. When I was younger, thin picks were very popular. So your Fender Cellulose Thin, your Fender Cellulose Medium. This is I want to say this is a 70 thousandths pick here. I still like a 77, 80, somewhere in there. But a lot of folks are playing 1 millimeter, 1.5 millimeter, really thick picks. It's something personally I have not really got into that much, but it has changed over time. A lot of folks have really changed what size of pick, thickness of pick that they play. So do you have a favorite shape? You know, is just the traditional guitar pick shape for you? What material do you play with? What thickness do you play with? Etc. The right hand technique, or the picking hand technique, I should say, in case you're left-handed, play left-handed, is very important, right? And so how you approach the strings, like we were talking about Stevie Ray earlier, how you approach the strings can have a lot to do with our overall tone. The purpose of having this conversation today was a couple of things. One is to link your gear selection with the tone is in your hands. Because as much as we want to say the tone is in your hands, and as much as other people want to say, I really like choosing my gear, it's kind of somewhere in the middle, right? All of the selections that we talked about, all of the experimentation that we talked about is necessary to figure out what you want to sound like. Probably my main purpose for this is to encourage that experimentation. Obviously we've been making videos for 11 years. We've got a couple thousand videos up. And one of the things I see in the community that is very common is that people fall into defaults and are no longer willing to experiment. And they make assumptions based on those defaults. Like we talked about, 7 1/4 radius is better for bending, or better for chords, and 12-inch radius is better for bending. I can't play, I hear this all the time, I can't play, or I will never play this fretboard radius, this fret size, this thickness of neck, this neck profile, this nut width. We didn't talk about nut width, but that's another important thing. All of those things, right? But instead of just dismissing an entire possibility of tone, why not experiment with it and see if there's something that you can find, that a purpose that you can find for it. What I found with very experienced like studio musicians and stuff is that they will have all of these things available if they have the means to do so. So they will have a flat fretboard radius, they will have a 7 1/4, they will have a thick neck, they will have a skinny neck, they will have many different, like they will not limit themselves. Experienced guitar players most of the time will not limit themselves to one spec. And what they'll do instead is they'll say, I will use this for this particular tone because my hands can do that on this guitar, but I can't really do this other thing because my hands can't do that. So I use this other guitar with this other spec for that. Now, we don't all have the means to do that, but still, go to your local guitar store and do that experimentation and see if there's something that you can like discover about your guitar playing and your tone, because the tone is in the hands, but it's also in the selection of the instrument. Super interesting and super fun stuff. If you take it from the perspective of having fun and going out there and trying to find something new, it can really expand how we play and what we play. Super cool. I love thinking about this stuff and experimenting. That's why I have so many different weird guitars around here, because I like to be able to experiment with that stuff. This was a really fun conversation. Let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you in the next video. Make sure you like and subscribe, do all the things, share this with others. Maybe they can have a contribution to this conversation as well. And we'll see you in the next video.